Ministers, please go ahead.
Bonjour tout le monde. Hi, everybody. We are here in Mexico City, and we're advocating on behalf of Canadians, the Canadian economy, and the bilateral relationship between Mexico and Canada writ large. As I have said from the very beginning, my mandate as Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister is to ensure that we're leveraging our diplomatic and strategic relationships for the benefit of Canada. And this goes beyond trade ties, which are in and of themselves vital, but we also seek to deepen our international partnerships and certainly our bilateral relationship with Mexico when it comes to security, when it comes to strategic geopolitical relationships. And that's exactly what I am doing on this trip with my colleague, François-Philippe Champagne, and in meetings with President Sheinbaum this morning and with my counterpart, Secretary de la Fuente. We've met with other members of the cabinet. We will be meeting with legislators and business leaders. And the bottom line is that we are building the momentum in the Mexico-Canada relationship, and we're making sure that this relationship will stand the test of time and that it is a comprehensive strategic relationship on the axes of the economy and geopolitical issues, including security. And with that, I will hand it over to François-Philippe.
Well, thank you very much. And sorry, folks, we're a bit late. I think responsibility for that, we're just finishing meeting with the Minister of Finance of Mexico. As Minister Anand said, this is a very successful trip. We both have been engaged in international relations for almost a decade now, and I would say it's quite extraordinary the depth and level of discussions we had today. For me, this was all about broadening and strengthening the great partnership that we enjoy with Mexico. Mexico offers a lot of opportunities, and we've been looking at how can we bring the relationship to its full potential, looking at investment facilitation, looking at how we can do more on critical minerals, looking at energy security. And I think at the end, based on the discussion we had the President with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Finance, I see a lot of opportunities. I think that, we have been neighbors by geography, and I think we gain from knowing each other a little bit better. And I think it was very obvious in our discussions today that our Mexican friends really welcome this strategic partnership with Canada and the visit that we have organized to really, look at the next steps in our relationship at a critical time in the world history. So, je vais juste seulement dire en français, évidemment, je suis avec la ministre Anand ici aujourd'hui à Mexico City. Très bonne rencontre avec la présidente Sheinbaum. Moi, je peux vous dire, ça fait près d'une décennie que je suis en matière de relations internationales. C'est une des discussions que j'ai eues qui était la plus profonde, qui était très stratégique, qui nous a permis de découvrir aussi des intérêts mutuels que l'on doit continuer de travailler. C'est un peu d'amener notre relation avec le Mexique à son plein potentiel. Le Mexique offre beaucoup d'opportunités. On a parlé de faciliter des investissements, on a parlé des chaînes d'approvisionnement, on a parlé des minéraux critiques, on a parlé de la sécurité énergétique. Et vraiment, je pense que ce qui en ressort de ça, c'est qu'on est voisins. La géographie nous a amenés comme voisins, mais maintenant, on regarde vraiment l'aspect stratégique de notre relation. Et la visite de la ministre Anand avec moi ici, je pense que ça nous aura permis de raffermir cette relation-là stratégique et certainement de développer des éléments qu'on devra travailler ensemble pour amener notre relation à son plein potentiel. Alors, je vais arrêter là-dessus. Ça va nous faire plaisir de prendre vos questions.
Peut-être je pourrais ajouter quelque chose en français aussi. Comme je l'ai dit dès le début de mon mandat à titre de ministre des Affaires étrangères du Canada, mon travail consiste à tirer parti de nos relations diplomatiques et stratégiques dans l'intérêt du Canada. Donc, nos conversations aujourd'hui ont été très importantes pas seulement pour notre économie domestique, mais aussi pour notre relation avec le Mexique et aussi dans les matières de sécurité. Donc, on peut avoir des questions là-dessus et nous sommes très contents d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui.
Thank you. First question, Ashley Burke, please go ahead.
Thanks for taking our questions. Ministers, what did the president tell you about how she got a 90-day extension with Trump?
The conversation with President Sheinbaum was well over an hour, and we discussed many aspects of the bilateral relationship. And we also discussed the desire for a strong North American economy. And in particular, Canada will continue to seek strong relationships both with Mexico and the United States for the benefits of this very important trade negotiation and relationship. I want to stress that Canada's economic relationship with the United States differs significantly from Mexico's. We have over $2 billion of trade passing through the Canada-US border every single day. And we also have different economic profiles, different levels of integration, and a long-standing economic and defense and security relationship that is perhaps the most integrated in the world. Therefore, to parse out individual elements of one country's negotiations versus our own is somewhat superficial because the relationship is so very complex, and we really do need to understand that complexity drives the entire negotiation, which of course is being led by Dominic LeBlanc. Minister?
No, I think the minister said it perfectly, Ashley. I mean, first of all, great to be talking. I think what we were focusing, Minister Anand and I here, was certainly looking at what more we could do with our Mexican partner. You know, I did take the opportunity to put that in perspective. When you look at the GDP of Mexico and Canada, and if you were to look at the combined GDP, you're looking at something close to 4 trillion, something close to the 5th largest economy in the world when you look at the combined numbers, and also half of the population in the United States. So I think, as Minister Anand said very eloquently, we both realize that the United States is a strategic partner to both Canada and Mexico. Geography has made us partners, and not only partners, but I would say trade partners in our relationship. We have deep relationship on the security front with respect to our supply chain, with respect to defense. But at the same time, I think, you know, our mission here, I would say with Minister Anand, was really, I feel with Mexico, we have been neighbors, but we need to get to know each other a bit better. And I think it was obvious this morning about the things that we could do on the energy side, on the security side with respect to some supplies, and with respect also to the auto sector. So the focus was very much looking forward, how much more we can do together.
Right. And sorry, Ashley, I'll just add one more thing, because François-Philippe was segueing into the bilateral relationship discussion. And indeed, what we have agreed is to build a work plan between Canada and Mexico, which focuses on a number of factors. For example, resilient supply chains, port-to-port lines of trade, artificial intelligence and the digital economy, energy security. And so this conversation, not only with President Sheinbaum, but also with our ministerial counterparts, was very detailed, and in fact will continue throughout the rest of this day and tomorrow. And we're also meeting with a number of members of the business community, because as we discussed with our Mexican counterparts, it's very much an all-hands-on-deck approach to ensure that we are kickstarting the Canada-Mexican bilateral economic relationship.
Have a follow-up question, Ashley?
I hear what you're saying about both countries being different, but there are a lot of Canadians today wondering why Mexico got an extension and Canada didn't. Was there anything you learned during your meeting with the president that could help provide an answer to Canadians?
We are continuing to share information of all sorts with Mexico, and I will say that our communications with our American counterparts, and that is the bilateral relationship that you're referring to in your question, continues to be constructive and will remain at the table in the interests of the Canadian economy, recognizing that the CUSMA is overall beneficial for the Canadian economy, and that we will continue to advocate for Canadian business, Canadian workers, and the Canadian economy overall.
Yeah, I mean, Ashley, I understand your question. As you appreciate, we had a very long discussion with President Sheinbaum, very substantive discussion, very friendly discussion, I would say. One thing that is coming out, obviously, is that CUSMA has been an essential element of competitiveness in North America. And that is true for Canada, it's true for the United States, it's true for Mexico. So in the context of that, I think there's a recognition of the importance of CUSMA, which has allowed us to integrate our supply chain, be competitive, and at the same time looking forward as a basis to engage with each other as we're looking in this new trading environment. So I would say a very positive discussion in that respect.
Thank you. La prochaine question, Inès Lombardo, la parole est à vous.
Oui, bonjour à vous deux. Ma question va s'adresser à Madame Anand, en français, s'il vous plaît. En fait, il y a un nouveau rapport qui a été publié par la Bibliothèque du Parlement récemment sur les armes qui ont été exportées vers Israël et qui semble en fait aller en contradiction avec votre déclaration de la semaine dernière sur le fait que le Canada n'exporte pas d'armes à Israël pour l'utiliser à Gaza. Donc en fait, ce rapport montre qu'il y a environ plus de 160 permis qui ont été utilisés en 2024 et 2 nouveaux permis délivrés. C'est à la page 6 du rapport. J'aimerais que vous confirmiez, j'aimerais avoir votre réaction là-dessus parce que c'est en contradiction avec ce que vous avez dit la semaine dernière.
C'est pas le cas. Le Canada n'a pas envoyé des armes à Israël, pas du tout. Depuis janvier 2024, ma prédécesseur et le gouvernement du Canada ce temps ont décidé d'arrêter les exportations d'armes comme ça. Donc, j'ai confirmé que les actions étaient complètes et ce n'est pas le cas, pas du tout, que les entreprises canadiennes envoient des armes à Israël. Et j'ai dit ça déjà dans ma déclaration cette semaine. Et aussi, je voudrais ajouter que s'il y a des entreprises qui ont décidé de violer la loi, c'est pas acceptable. C'est pas le gouvernement du Canada qui a décidé si les entreprises envoient des armes. Mais si nous voyons que ça c'est le cas, il y aura des sanctions, des conséquences légales, et ça c'est une priorité pour moi comme ministre. La situation en Gaza, c'est inacceptable. C'est très concernant et c'est à cause de ça que nous avons décidé de continuer d'envoyer l'aide humanitaire avec le airdrops, par exemple, avec la nourriture aérienne, avec l'aide humanitarienne. J'étais aux Nations Unies semaine passée, par exemple, et j'ai annoncé l'aide humanitarienne de 30 millions de dollars. Et ça, c'est avec une autre plus de 300 millions de dollars. Donc, nous sommes le troisième pays avec l'aide humanitaire bilatérale pour le Gaza et nous continuons d'être là avec l'aide humanitaire. Donc, nous sommes clairs. Nous ne, nous ne sommes pas en accord avec des entreprises qui envoient des armes à Israël et s'ils décident de le faire, nous sommes là avec des sanctions légales.
Ok, je comprends votre réponse, seulement j'aimerais savoir du coup comment le Canada et comment votre ministère peut ne pas être au courant que des entreprises canadiennes exportent des armes vers Israël.
Nous sommes au courant. Nous sommes là avec le loi, mais les entreprises canadiennes doivent suivre le loi. Et ça, c'est clair. Ça, c'est la responsabilité des entreprises de suivre la loi et on va être avec la loi claire, comme j'ai expliqué jusqu'à maintenant.
Merci. Next question, Jillian Piper, please go ahead.
Hi, ministers. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. My first question is for you, Minister Champagne. Prime Minister Carney said today that he's open to removing counter tariffs against the Americans. Which industries is your government considering removing counter tariffs from?
Well, as you would expect, Jillian, I was not with the Prime Minister this morning. I was with Minister Anand. We were here very engaged with President Sheinbaum to strengthen and deepen the relationship with Mexico. I did not have a chance to be very transparent to look at the statement made by the Prime Minister of Canada. But I know that the Prime Minister of Canada has been saying to Canadians that our goal as a government and his goal as Prime Minister is to seek the best possible agreement for Canada, for our industry and our workers. And I would take the statement that he made today as the guidance you're looking for with respect to what additional next steps we can do to further Canadian interests with respect to our negotiation with the United States.
Thank you. And my next question is for you, Minister Anand. Today, Mark Carney said that he's very cognizant that CUSMA review is going to take place with Mexico and the U.S. in 9 months. Is your government not retaliating against the Americans because you're trying to be in Trump's good graces ahead of renegotiating the free trade agreement next year?
Our view is that the CUSMA agreement serves the greatest number of Canadians and Canadian businesses and the overall economic stability of Canada. And for that reason, we do want to enter into the CUSMA process, and certainly we'll be looking to do that. Again, the message that we carried here today in Mexico City was that the Canada-Mexico bilateral relationship is extremely important to Canada, and that from the position of our overall North American continental economic security, ensuring that we have a process in place for CUSMA is also extremely important.
Thank you. La prochaine question, Marie Chabot-Johnson. Please, la parole est à vous.
Madame Chabot-Johnson, on vous entend pas. We cannot hear you, Madame Chabot-Johnson. Oh, now you appear on our screen, but we cannot hear you.
We'll take another question. Next question, Catherine Morrison, please go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you both so much for your time today. Earlier today, Carney said that he will speak with US President Donald Trump when it makes sense. I realize that you haven't had time to review the statement yet, but just wondering from that, when do you think makes sense? When would you like to see the two speak?
Well, I would say, I think you referred to Prime Minister Carney, right? Just so,
Yes, exactly.
yeah, you were referring to the Prime Minister. So Prime Minister Carney, I would say, I think the position that the Prime Minister has taken was always to engage with the President at always the strategic time. This has been a negotiating process. You've seen Minister LeBlanc, which has been engaging. There's been discussion at the government level with respect to a number of issues that are on the table. The Prime Minister has referred to that they were intense and complex. And I think what the Prime Minister is trying to express there is that, when you engage from the Prime Minister to the President, you have to be strategic. You have to do that at the right time to further the right goal and to certainly get the outcome that you're looking for. So I think in that, instead of trying to create artificial deadlines as you go along, the way you want to look at that is the Prime Minister engaging with the President at the most strategic time. And I think that's what he was reflecting. And I would say this is what he's been doing. And it's the same thing we've heard this morning, without getting to the details of the discussion Mr. Anand and I had with President Sheinbaum, that our Mexican colleagues have been doing. They've been engaging strategically with the White House. And that's exactly the same kind of playbook that we've been doing in Canada. As Minister Anand said, our realities are different, but in somewhat similar as well. So I think that what you've seen is in terms of engagement to do that strategically. And I think it has provided the right outcome for Canada, where we've been able to defend our industry, defend our workers, and certainly put Canada on a path to rebuild also our economy. I often say there's a similarity between 1945 and 2025 when you're talking about CDR and the Prime Minister calling on this country to rebuild, to look ahead, to be confident, and to be resilient. I think this is a call that has been answered and been heard by all Canadians.
Amazing, thank you. And my second question is for Minister Anand. I'm wondering if you can share if Canada is planning any more airdrops aids to Gaza, and if so, can you share any details about when they'll take place and how much more aid we plan to send?
So I'll start with the facts. We have committed over $340 million in humanitarian aid, making us the third highest bilateral donor of humanitarian aid for this crisis. I say that because it is extremely important to continue doing whatever is possible. And we announced another 10 million last week. I'll also say that I am working with my counterparts around the world and certainly members of the United Nations to bring forward a UN resolution on humanitarian aid for Gaza. In terms of the airdrops are part of a larger effort to ensure that food gets into Gaza. We know that land transport is more effective and will be our focus in the long term. When I spoke with my counterpart in Israel, I did press him on whether further land transportation carrying food would be permitted, and he agreed that Israel would look at that, and we did see Israel open some aid up in going over land to Gaza. At the same time, Canada wants to do whatever is possible. So I have been working with my Jordanian counterpart, Ayman Safani, Minister Safani, to ensure that we can use the Jordanian land corridor as well as utilize any space on Jordanian flights, as well as the Canadian Armed Forces airdrops that we know have begun to occur. So the answer to your question is those airdrops will continue. Our preference is for land transport, and that is a more effective and will be our focus for the long term.
Thank you. Next question, Stephanie Levitz, please go ahead.
Hi, ministers. Minister Champagne, you said a moment ago you were talking about Mexico engaging strategically with the White House and that being the same kind of playbook we're using. But they got an extension to the tariffs and we didn't. So is there something wrong with our strategy?
Well, I would say that our strategy is being the same since we started that. Remember when we said we would be fighting the tariffs, we would be protecting our workers and our industry, and would build our country. I would say if you look, one of the tenets of our strategy is to make sure that we get the right deal for Canada. And I think there is no need to rush into that. But to get the right deal, you need strategic engagement. And I think the way we've been doing with Minister LeBlanc, the way we've been doing, I've been talking to Secretary Besson, the Prime Minister has been talking to the President, obviously. Minister Anand also has been talking with their counterpart. I think you would see that Canada has been at the center of a lot of these discussions. We preside the G7. I can tell you, as the president of the G7 finance minister, there's always discussions around that. We try to air these, my role has always been to keep unity, but at the same acknowledge that we need to restore stability and growth, and therefore engaging with our partners has been the right strategy. The Prime Minister engaging with the President has been the right strategy, and making sure that we get the right deal for Canada is the right strategy. And I would say Canadians are understanding that, and in a way, I've been spending time in budget consultation, and people have been echoing, you're doing the right thing. We don't need to rush into that. What we need is the right agreement for the country. Minister Anand has been clear that the situation of Canada is different. I keep saying we buy more from the United States than China, Japan, the UK, and France combined. We're the second largest investor. We have integrated supply chain. So the way you engage with the White House, if you're Canada, in the world where, it seems to go in a direction that tariffs are going to be the norm, and that you'll have some trade restrictions. If you're Canada, I would say the strategic approach is to engage as we've been doing, but at the same time protecting your strategic interest. And I think that's what Canada's been doing.
Just as a follow-up there, how much of this trip was about resetting the relationship between Canada and Mexico in the context of that moment in time where the Prime Minister and others were talking about, Prime Minister Trudeau, and Premier Doug Ford were talking about cutting Mexico out of talks altogether. Did you feel the need to go down there at this moment in time to reassure Mexico that we are still partners with them in this long slog?
Stephanie, thanks for that very pertinent question. I will say that we can't forget that President Sheinbaum came to the G7 summit at the invitation of Prime Minister Carney in June in Kananaskis. And that is the moment, I will say, that the momentum started to build in the relationship. And we are picking up on the momentum and the excellent bilateral conversation that Prime Minister Carney had with President Sheinbaum. And indeed, she participated in the outreach partners session on day 2 of the Kananaskis summit. So it is a relationship that is extremely important to Canada. That is at the center of this trip. But there's a recognition also that Mexico plays an extremely important role in the global economy. And we want to make sure that from a Canadian standpoint, we're recognizing that and we're leveraging it for the advantage of the Canadian domestic economy. And I've been saying since I was appointed that my role as Foreign Affairs Minister will be to represent our country and to leverage our diplomatic relationships for the benefit of Canadians and the Canadian economy. That is the premise of the discussions we are having here today. But let's not forget that momentum started to build in Kananaskis when President Sheinbaum met Prime Minister Carney, and Minister Champagne and I, as we have done before, are ensuring that we are representing Canadian interests in building the bilateral relationship here in Mexico.
Yeah, if I may add, as you would appreciate, it sends a very strong signal when you have the foreign minister of a country and the finance minister come. I think that message is understood loud and clear in Mexico City. We have heard it time and time again. We're going to have the roundtable with business leaders. And I think there's a recognition that Mexico offers a lot of opportunities, but also Canada offers a lot of opportunities to Mexico when it comes to critical minerals and the supply chain around that, when it comes around energy security, when it comes about infrastructure. So I go back to my example. We have been neighbors, and I think we benefit by knowing each other more. And when you spend time like we've been doing, you find a lot of opportunities and possibilities. And that's really what Minister Anand, thanks to her leadership, who put this mission together, really the focus of that has been how we capitalize in that, being neighbors, being part of the CUSMA agreement, and also being both free traders. So there's opportunities that we're going to follow up, and messages understood loud and clear, I think, here in Mexico.
And if I could just add,
you see, we add on each other. It's good. You can imagine in a meeting how it goes. We add on each other.
I'll just say that we came down here. We had planned to meet with our respective counterparts and President Sheinbaum. And after the meeting with President Sheinbaum, we then were put in touch with additional ministers so that we can broaden the efficacy and the emphasis that Canada is placing on the relationship with Mexico. And what we would really like to see is a full court press on ministers engaging with their counterparts across government. And that's what we'll continue to work on.
Thank you. Nous allons réessayer la question de Marie Chabot-Johnson.
And I think that might be the last, because talking about the PAC agenda, that's what Minister Anand was saying. If it were PAC, now it's extra PAC because we have three other ministers and leaders to meet. But go on with the question. We'll try to take it, and then we may have to sign off from Mexico City.
Mais merci de la prendre. Comme ça prend un peu de français.
Oui.
Donc, ma question est simple, c'est en fait, qu'est-ce que vous pouvez apprendre du Mexique dans vos relations avec le président Trump?
Ben, écoutez, d'abord, ce qu'on a partagé, c'est, et pour le Mexique et pour le Canada, l'accord de libre-échange, et même pour les Américains aussi, l'accord de libre-échange est la base de nos relations commerciales. C'est un accord commercial qui nous a permis de faire de l'Amérique du Nord l'un des blocs économiques les plus compétitifs, de bâtir des chaînes d'approvisionnement qui sont intégrées, de regarder aussi en avant, c'est-à-dire que oui, pendant des années, et le Mexique et le Canada, on a fait beaucoup avec nos voisins américains. On va continuer de le faire parce que la géographie nous a amenés ensemble comme voisins, partenaires, alliés. Mais en même temps, quand on regarde pour nous au Canada un peu plus au sud, c'est-à-dire vers le Mexique, il y a beaucoup d'opportunités encore, il y a beaucoup de possibilités. Je le disais en anglais plus tôt, c'est un peu comme un voisin qu'on gagne à découvrir parce que là, on se rend compte qu'au niveau de la sécurité énergétique, on peut jouer un rôle. Au niveau des minéraux critiques, on peut jouer un rôle. On a parlé aussi au niveau des infrastructures qu'on pouvait jouer un rôle. Alors, je pense qu'il y a une compréhension commune avec la ministre Anand et moi. Je pense qu'on sort de nos discussions. On en aura d'autres parce vous savez, on est encore là pendant 24 heures et il y a beaucoup d'autres rencontres à venir. Mais je disais, il y a beaucoup d'opportunités et je pense que là, on est en train de se rendre compte qu'on doit amener cette relation-là à son plein potentiel. Je parle par exemple, en terminant, j'étais avec le ministre des Finances, on parlait de comment on peut faciliter les investissements d'un côté ou de l'autre. Les fonds de pension canadiens s'intéressent au Mexique, les fonds mexicains s'intéressent aux Canadiens. Alors, c'est un peu ça que la ministre Anand et moi, on est en train de passer j'allais dire, de concepts qui ont été échangés à concrétiser cette relation-là commerciale qui est mutuellement bénéfique et continuer de travailler avec notre partenaire américain, comme vous l'avez dit. Mais en même temps, quand vous regardez l'accord de libre-échange, c'est 3 partenaires. On fait beaucoup déjà avec les États-Unis. On va continuer de faire avec les États-Unis. Mais en même temps, il y a aussi un autre partenaire de taille. Je disais, si vous regardez le PNB du Mexique et du Canada et vous combinez, par exemple, ces chiffres-là, vous arrivez avec un PNB d'environ 4 trillions. Donc, si vous comparez ça, ça serait la 5e économie au monde à peu près, 174 millions de population, environ la moitié des États-Unis. Alors, il y a quand même des choses qu'on a mis de l'avant avec la ministre Anand, qui, je pense, quand on parle de nos entrepreneurs, eux, les Mexicains sont intéressés de regarder un peu plus vers le Canada, ce qu'ils peuvent acheter au Canada. Et la même chose du côté canadien, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire avec nos partenaires mexicains pour rendre l'espace économique nord-américain plus compétitif avec nos voisins américains?
Et aussi, peut-être, je pourrais ajouter quelque chose ici. C'est pas seulement une question de l'Amérique du Nord, mais au sujet de la question de Stéphanie, juste maintenant, le Mexique est le 3e partenaire commercial du Canada après les États-Unis et la Chine avec plus de 56 milliards de dollars d'échanges commerciaux en 2024. Donc, comme un pays fort, c'est important d'avoir les relations très fortes avec le Mexique bilatéral et aussi multilatéral. Donc, nous sommes avec le Mexique partie des membres de TPP. Ça, c'est une chose très importante parce que nous continuons de bâtir nos relations économiques avec le Mexique et avec d'autres pays. Parce que à ce temps maintenant, quand il y a des moments de stress dans l'économie globale, c'est important de diversifier nos chaînes d'approvisionnement, pas seulement avec le Mexique et d'autres pays, mais avec des membres de ces ententes-là, comme cette entente que j'ai déjà mentionnée jusqu'à maintenant.
Mais donc, je comprends que vous envoyez beaucoup de fleurs à l'économie mexicaine parce que vous voulez la séduire. Mais ce que j'aurais aimé comprendre, c'est quelles fleurs vous auriez pu envoyer à l'administration mexicaine en termes de ce qu'ils font de bien au niveau stratégie en dialogue avec les Américains. Et ma deuxième question, c'était sur le fait que on vit beaucoup d'imprévisibilité par rapport à y aura-t-il des tarifs, aura-t-il pas des tarifs, puis ça crée beaucoup d'insécurité chez les gens. Comment est-ce que vous travaillez, vous et avec le Mexique, pour assurer que l'administration Trump ne décidera pas un jour d'imposer des tarifs sur des produits issus de l'ASEAN?
On ne sait pas qu'est-ce que le président va décider au sujet de les tarifs, mais pour notre part, on peut continuer, on peut continuer d'essayer de s'assurer que nous protéger notre économie, que nous bâtir notre économie. Et donc, ça, c'est notre travail acharné d'essayer de représenter notre pays et notre économie, n'importe quoi les décisions des États-Unis dans l'avenir. Donc, ça, c'est pas facile chaque jour, mais qu'est-ce que nous pouvons faire? Nous continuons d'avoir ces rencontres bilatérales avec nos partenaires, comme le Mexique. J'étais en Malaisie, par exemple, au Japon, en France et en Allemagne pour faire la même chose ici. Le Canada est là et on continue de bâtir les chaînes d'approvisionnement avec tous les pays, toujours dans les intérêts d'économie canadienne.
Non, je vais terminer seulement en disant, vous savez, dans le monde des tarifs, les choses changent vite. Alors, on a avantage à garder des relations proches avec nos partenaires, nos alliés à travers le monde. La ministre Anand le disait, le premier ministre Carney l'a dit, vous savez, l'une des choses qu'on peut faire, évidemment, c'est de négocier le meilleur accord possible avec la Maison-Blanche. Mais l'autre, c'est aussi diversifier notre économie, diversifier nos industries, diversifier nos partenariats. Et je pense que je vous dirais, dans un monde où il y a, comme vous dites, beaucoup d'incertitudes. Le Canada est vu comme un partenaire fiable, un partenaire stable, un partenaire où il y a la primauté du droit, un partenaire, moi je dis souvent, quand on fait autant la ministre Anand l'a fait à l'international, comme quand je le fais au niveau du G7, vous savez, quand je regarde le Canada parmi les partenaires, le Canada continue d'attirer énormément de talents. Les gens reconnaissent que le Canada a beaucoup d'industries, que ce soit de l'aérospatial à l'automobile, à la construction maritime. Le Canada a les minéraux critiques pour permettre de bâtir les véhicules de demain, les semi-conducteurs. Le Canada a énormément d'énergie, donc beaucoup d'énergie renouvelable. Finalement, le Canada est le seul pays du G7 qui a un accord de libre-échange avec tous les pays du G7. Alors, c'est sûr que quand vous êtes le Canada et vous vous engagez avec des partenaires, la ministre Anand l'a fait du côté de l'Asie, on le fait évidemment avec nos autres partenaires à travers le monde, mais il y a un partenaire qui est dans le même continent que nous et ça s'appelle le Mexique. Ce qu'on dit, c'est qu'on a mis beaucoup d'emphase au cours des dernières décennies sur cette relation-là commerciale privilégiée avec les États-Unis. Mais quand on va un peu plus au sud, il y a un pays, il y a un partenaire de choix là. Quand je vous disais le Mexique, population de 132 millions, beaucoup de consommateurs, beaucoup de projets en infrastructure, beaucoup de projets, par exemple, au niveau portuaire, des opportunités d'admiraux critiques, ben, je pense que nous, on revient, la ministre Anand et moi, avec un bagage d'idées qui nous permet ensuite de ça de connecter les entreprises canadiennes avec nos partenaires mexicains et d'augmenter le pourcentage de notre commerce bilatéral. Je pense que quand on parle de l'accord de libre-échange Canada, Mexique, États-Unis, ben, il y a un partenaire là-dedans où quand on regarde les chiffres, ce qu'on se dit, la ministre Anand et moi, on peut faire mieux. L'industrie canadienne peut faire mieux. Et c'est exactement la mission qu'on s'est donnée, c'est de développer des partenariats, faire de nouveaux partenariats. Et c'est justement la table ronde qu'on va avoir avec plusieurs CEO, PDG mexicains qui sont avec nous, puis les rencontres qu'on aura. Mais je peux vous dire que vraiment, quand vous regardez même les médias mexicains, je pense que la visite de la ministre Anand et du Canada ici à Mexico City envoie un message positif, un message constructif et le genre de message que nos partenaires mexicains attendaient du Canada pour travailler main dans la main dans les prochaines années, les prochaines décennies, à affermir la compétitivité de l'Amérique du Nord. Alors là-dessus, à moins que vous ayez quelque chose, non, c'est Madame Anand, allez-y.
So one more thing I'll just say is, let's take a step back and think about the bilateral relationship with Mexico, where we can make a difference. There's the B2B space, that's business to business, and we need to ensure that Canadian businesses stay engaged with the economy in Mexico for the benefit of their own viability. And certainly we're going to be meeting with Canadian businesses over these 2 days. Secondly, it is government to government, and we've spoken to a large extent about what work we're going to do and building that work plan forward in ensuring that the ministerial dialogue across portfolios occurs: finance, foreign affairs, energy and natural resources, AI, and public safety. Then we also need to ensure that we are focusing on the supply chains. The north-south corridor is extremely important, and we'll be looking at port to port. And then thirdly is the people-to-people ties. 7% of the Canadian population are tourists in Mexico on a year-to-year basis. That provides Mexico with commercial and economic viability, but it is also important for Canadians who seek to travel. And so we're also focusing on that line of work. So there's business to business, government to government, people to people ties. Those are all at the very center of the conversations that we are having here in Mexico City. Thank you very much.
Là-dessus, on va vous dire merci pour continuer le travail. Merci tout le monde. Bonne journée à partir du Canada. On vous cède la parole à partir de Mexico City. Merci tout le monde. Bonne soirée. Merci. À bientôt.
Merci, c'est ce qui conclut cette conférence de presse. Thank you. This concludes the press conference.